All right, everyone, welcome to the Combat Learjet podcast. Uh, I am joined tonight by Steve from Combat Learjet and Mike Wagner from Mike Wagner on Instagram. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, appreciate you coming on, Mike. So
Yeah.
thanks a lot for jumping in here. I know it was kind of short notice for you, but look
Hey, no
forward to.
problem. I love being here. Yeah, it's great. And oh yeah, just Pilot Wagner on Instagram and Mike Wagner on YouTube. You can find me at either place. So
Yeah, and I know. I mean, we'll talk about. I want to talk about some of your videos and some of that stuff that you've done because I know some of those have been super popular out there.
yeah,
Uh,
crazy.
yeah, so it's we're excited to be able to talk to you, and we're gonna have a good time tonight. We're gonna talk. As I posted, we're also going to talk up some different things, chemtrails, conspiracy theory
theories.
type things, and maybe hit on 9/11 a little bit. So it should be a fun podcast tonight. So, well, Mike, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into flying, and what you'd
Oh,
like to share today.
sure. Yeah, I was just in college and I just started flying on my own. Thought it would be something interesting to do, and ended up really, kind of never stopping. So ended up just kept flying, kept getting jobs, and kept getting hired places. And fly a corporate Falcon 2000 now. It's a blast. Love doing it. And it's giving me some time to like do other stuff like make videos and manipulate media, mess with people. So it's a good time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you started flying pretty early on in college, you said, and then just
I actually got my like private license when I was like 23 years old, so I was kind of a late starter. And
okay.
I didn't. I mean, I was like a junior in college at the time. I ended up with a degree in Japanese, which is kind of odd, but
Wow,
I was totally not thinking about flying, but that's kind of where I ended up. So I'm happy with it.
so kind of your roots, you just got your private pilots and then moved on, got other ratings, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
just
as
yeah,
not as
just
familiar.
just got my private license and then got my instrument license, then commercial CFI and worked as a CFI. Then I flew a charter, and then I got hired at the place I'm at, and I've been there ever since. So it's been a
Awesome.
pretty actually from compared to what it could have been, what I've seen a lot of people go through. I've had it really really easy. So I feel bad for like people who've been furloughed, that type of stuff. But I've kind of I don't know, just my timing's been really good for some reason, and I'm happy. So
Yeah, that's something I'm learning in the whole aviation world is it's all about
yeah,
timing.
it is. I don't care how good or bad you are. If your timing's bad, it's just bad, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It
So
really is. And thankfully, right now is a good time to be a pilot. So
most definitely.
that's great. Well, that's awesome. I know I first ran into you on Instagram. I saw one of your videos out there. It is actually I sit around,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's. You want to talk a little bit about that one? That one's a
yeah,
great one.
yeah. That was the one that actually I just did the remade it because the first one I just wasn't happy with it. So it's the one I just made is called "I Sit Around" Part Duh. It's basically the same. It's exactly the same
Yeah,
song. Part Duh. Big fan of like Hot Shots Part Duh.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
I did I reshot it kind of like when I first shot it. I was like, man, I see this in my head, but I wasn't really good with the software or anything. And I decided, hey, I'm gonna redo this and make this like what my vision kind of was because I can do it now. And then and it just came out. I just put it out. It hasn't really done too much, but I'm actually really happy with the end product. So
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. And you had, what did your first one? How many views did that thing get on YouTube?
oh, on YouTube it had like 317,000, but it had
Wow.
but it was actually bought like break.com, and that had like I think a couple million views. So that was kind of cool. It made like national news, and it was over in Europe for a while. It's kind of
Wow.
freaky. So
That's awesome.
Well, you did a really great job. I mean, it sounds, I don't know. And anybody that has done anybody that life, I mean, the fact that you do a lot of sitting around waiting on your passengers. So that's why I appreciate that. Also, I've enjoyed some of the other ones you posted. Uh, your selfies hanging out of the airplane on Instagram.
oh
I
yeah.
absolutely love reading the comments on those posts.
Oh
I'll be
man.
like, that's photoshopped, man.
No
Yeah,
way that's photoshopped.
yeah, I know. It's funny. I mean, obviously, people are like, "Hey, is that possible?" No, not
Mhm.
really.
Not
You're
Yeah.
gonna hang out of an airplane.
Yeah. That's
So
yeah. No, that was just something I had kind of in my head, and I was one day said, yeah, I got a little bit of spare time. I've got Photoshop. I'm just gonna put this together, and had a nice little picture of Chicago in the background of it, and put together, hey, that looks pretty good. So
Yeah.
I didn't think it'd do what it did, but yeah,
Well,
that's kind of funny.
and it's some of your stuff. I'm impressed. I mean, it takes how much time does it take you to do some of those videos? Like I spray my chemtrails at night.
Oh man,
What
that
did you put into
one,
that one?
yeah, chemtrails at night was a monster. It was where I actually kind of learned the software or whatever, and I had a whole. Well, then we can talk about it in the later half if you'd like, but it was a that thing, the song itself, putting the music together and performing the music and recording it and trying to get it to sound somewhat decent. Usually, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 15 hours of work. But then the video, I mean, I can't count the hundreds of hours I put in on chemtrails at night. So
Wow. Yeah. Well, definitely that's going to be part 2 when we get into the chemtrails. So we'll talk more about
right,
that one.
yeah,
But we really appreciate you being on. We're going to talk a few different things, and then, like I said, we'll carry over into the next session, and we'll talk
awesome.
some more of the chemtrails. But
Yeah,
no,
that's great.
I just want to say, as I one of the ideas when we started putting this together, there's a lot of purposes for this podcast. We hope to. I said in my first couple, we take a lot of questions. I take a lot of questions on Instagram. How do I become a pilot?
Mhm.
What do I need to do? So from that standpoint, we always want to help folks do that, and so I want to keep this as a platform to do that. In fact, uh, one of the things I was talking about in the future is I'd like to have a flight doc on from the military. I got some flight doc friends, and we could discuss medical issues that some people will and will not, what the military will accept. So that's something I'm working on in the future. So if you have those kind of questions, like we talked about in the past, I wear glasses or, ADHD, all those kind of things. I want to try to get, legitimate answers out there for you guys. So that's part of it. Another part that is part of my Instagram, as you followed, is I enjoy having a good time. I enjoy laughing, and I also enjoy, teasing some of the conspiracy theorists.
And they're so easy to tease.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. So this program tonight is going to be dedicated a little bit more to that, and having a good time with it. We're not wanting to be, ugly and hateful to these folks, but it's fun to talk about it, and we will discuss a few of them. So,
And
really,
hopefully debunk some of the more popular ones.
yeah, I would at least like to give some pilot perspective on some of this. In particular, the chemtrails. We'll talk about that, but. The thing that kind of really moved me to really want to do this was I posted yesterday. I did a 9/11 post, and it really struck me at the comments of how many people believe that this was an inside job, that there was some kind of conspiracy theory behind that. So I wanted just to address that. It's one of those things. It's very personal to me in that, and we can talk a little bit about that. I don't have all the answers, obviously, and there's always questions out there. There's always, things that you could ask. Well, who was behind it? I don't know. I don't know all that stuff, but I would like to address a couple of those things. And I'd also like to maybe tell the story of kind of where I was when that went down and what happened. So I'll just begin by the morning of September 11th, 2001. I was driving to work. I wasn't scheduled to fly that day. It was just an office day. So I was driving to work. I think I was listening to something on the radio. It wasn't the news. I wasn't catching any of that at the time. I'll never forget. I parked my car and I walked into my squadron. And as soon as I walked in, they had the TV going, and everybody was like glued to the TV. And at this point, the first building had been struck, and I remember just, nobody really knew what was going on. I think the first news reports were maybe it was a small airplane that had hit the building. And, that's kind of my mindset initially is, somebody just wasn't paying attention and hit one of these buildings. And I remember as I'm sitting there, kind of sitting down in a chair going, nobody's really talking. All the pilots in the squadron are just glued to the TV. Um, I remember seeing on the news, they were live on the news, and I saw the second plane come in and hit. And, and at that point, everybody was just, as I'm sure the world was, gasp and realize, oh my gosh, this is something bigger than that. And then about this time, you started hearing reports of, the Pentagon and some of that. So without retelling that entire story, we were all sitting around, and the commander walked in and he said, "I want everybody to go home and get into crew rest." So he was wise enough to know that in the military we have to be put into crew rest. We need a minimum of 12 hours of crew rest before we can come back and fly. So since I was already in there, there was no missions dropping at that moment. There was nothing that we could do at that moment. So they sent us home and put us into crew rest and told us to stand by the phone, be ready to go at 12 hours. And sure enough, I think I got a call about 12 hours later, really late, September 11th, early on September 12th, said, "Hey, we need you to come in. We've got a mission for you." So I came in, we got spun up, and another crew had actually flown through the night, went out to California. They'd picked up some engineers, brought them back to our base there in Colorado Springs. And then me and the other pilot came in because they had run out of crew duty day. We picked them up and we pressed on. So our mission was to fly, I think there's 5 or 6 of them, to Newark, New York City. So on September 12th, I headed to New York City, and I'll never forget it. We took off out of Colorado Springs. Sun wasn't up yet, and right as we tower switched us to departure, and I think departure cleared us direct to Newark, which is in the flying world's unheard of. You usually have a handful of fixes that you're going to go to between there, but everybody had stopped flying. The entire all airplanes were grounded at that time because we just didn't know if there was others out there. So this was a weird, very unusual time for me to take off at a time that there was nobody else flying. And we took off. I got to Kansas City Center, which is one of the largest centers in the nation. And the controller told me, he said, "You're the only one I'm controlling." And which was strange. Obviously, normally they have, hundreds, if not thousands of airplanes they're controlling. And we ended up having a conversation just like we're having right here, talking on the radio all the way across Kansas City Center. Just asking questions, what he thought, what I thought, and it was just surreal, actually. Somewhere past Kansas City Center, we got a call, and they asked us if we were going to be intercepted by a fighter to verify who we were. So at that point, a F-16, I'm assuming, intercepted us. We never saw them. It was a ghost intercept where they just are back there. They see you, but they obviously don't want you to see them. And that actually happened 2 separate times across the country as different planes just made sure who we were. And they were obviously, at this point, we have a few fighters up, making sure nothing's going to go on. I remember coming in to beginning the descent into Newark, and I would say in the mid to high teens, maybe low 20s, there was a debris layer from the towers that you could see. And obviously the sun's up at this point. And me and the other pilot, I remember talking about it, saying, that's debris from the fallen buildings. And anyway, long story short, we ended up getting in there. We landed. We got the engineers. We were able to talk to them a little bit, and their primary job, or at least that they thought at the time, was to go in and analyze the other buildings around the trade center that they felt like were going to be structurally compromised due to, all that debris coming down. And as we know, Tower 7, I think it came down something like 7 hours after the first 2 towers. So they were concerned that more of that was going to go on. So we dropped them off. We got gas. And, we went in to the FBO there at Newark. And again, it was just nobody was moving. Nobody was on the ramp. Nobody was taxiing. So it was like we had the entire airfield to ourselves. So we did, we taxied however. Obviously, we still talked to everybody, but everybody was like, taxi however you want to get there. Nobody else is moving. So we did that. And over the next several days, our unit flew multiple missions, different places, but primarily in and out of New York. And we also went in and out of Andrews too, because of the Pentagon. So we were pretty involved in that time frame. And I just remember thinking back then that our whole world had changed, and it had, and I didn't realize really what that looked like. But I would say on the backside of that, most of the deployments that I went on, most of the missions I flew overseas was in direct response to September 11th. So that kind of ties me into the whole, I guess, where it becomes a little bit more personal for me is the fact that pretty much my entire career, everything I've done, the missions I've flown, plus all the people that I know that have fought and given the ultimate sacrifice has been in response to what happened on that day. So I take it personal, I guess, from the standpoint of I feel like to say this was an inside job, we did it to ourselves so we could go to war just seems ludicrous to me. And I've done some of the research that they talk about and see that. So that's kind of the background of where I got, how I got there, and then maybe why it's more personal to me than not. But I would say most of your military folks probably feel similar that this is something we fought for and people have died for. So to kind of think of it as it was an inside job just to get us into a war so we could get some oil and make money is
some oil that we ultimately just gave back.
Yeah, that we didn't even keep from Iraq. So that's kind of where I come from. So I guess just a couple of maybe talk about a couple of the known conspiracy theories with 9/11, and I'll at least give my 2 cents on it. Again, I'm not an expert in any of these. And then if there's some questions on that, maybe we can field some of that. But, I would say the one thing that I hear more often than not, and it's just this constant phrase that people like to throw out, and I see it on my page, and I saw it yesterday on my post a lot, is that jet fuel cannot melt steel. And what they're getting at is that the temperature that jet fuel typically burns at, I mean, obviously it varies, but it burns at around 800 degrees to, and I even wrote this down, I had to make sure, 800 to 1500 degrees. Steel melts at about 2800 degrees, 2700 and some odd degrees. So by using that logic, the fire would never have got hot enough to melt the steel beams in the World Trade Center. However, there's a great, I saw it on Instagram, it was kind of like a redneck page, and he's like, hey, let me demonstrate how this works. And he was a metal worker. He took a big, thick, like a 3-inch steel
I-beam
bar. Yeah. And he put it in a vise and he heated it up until it got red hot, but it's not melted, obviously. And then he reached over with the glove on and just bent that I-beam straight over. So that is the issue, I think, is that they figure the temperature from the fire and the airplane hitting the building probably was around 1800 degrees. And how did it get above jet fuel? Well, obviously the building's on fire. Now we have office supplies and furniture and everything else is on fire. So they figured that the temperature was around that. And doing some research on metal, they figured at around 1100 degrees, steel loses about 50% of its strength. And around 1800 degrees, it loses 90% of its strength. So in essence, I think that's the issue, is that once the steel got hot enough, then the weight of the building above it, obviously it collapsed. And then to me, it just started a domino. I think really the first collapse, if the story below it could have held that, maybe it would have. But once it starts going, it's just dominoes and it's going to come down. So, that's my 2 cents on the World Trade Centers, what brought them down. And that kind of, to me, debunks the whole jet fuel can't melt steel. So it didn't melt the steel. You got the steel hot enough to collapse. So the other things that I've heard that have been interesting to me is that the whole Building 7, that's an ongoing thing. We talked a little bit about that. There was a fire in that building as well, and it probably the same thing happened there. One of the other things I've heard a lot is that we actually shot down Flight 93, which that is not true. Everything we have and we know about that is that that airplane was brought down most likely when the passengers decided to, hey, let's roll and let's get in there. Then the terrorists realized that we're not going to make it, and so they just drove the airplane in the ground. One of the things they talk about from that crash is that there was a white jet spotted somewhere around the crash, and I researched that, and it sounds like that there was an airplane coming into an airport nearby, and ATC asked if they wouldn't mind, flying around the wreckage to tell them what they saw. So that was probably the white jet. The other thing that has been brought out there is one of the engines was not in the crash site. Excuse me. Well, and part of my background as an accident investigator is that that's very common, especially if you nosedive an airplane straight in the ground. Engines are the heaviest parts, and they typically will bounce out of the crash site. So where everything else might just totally embed in there, the engines a lot of times come out. So, so those are just a few of the things that I looked at. I saw, I felt like there's plenty of answers for what it is. Now I will tell you, and I just talked to somebody recently. They said, "Well, who was really behind it?" I don't know. There's probably, and not to start anything, but there's a good chance. Obviously, Saudi Arabia. Who knows? I wouldn't necessarily debate that there was other players behind it besides just purely ISIS or terrorists. So, but that's that's what, at least what I think. So I don't know. Do you guys have anything to add on that? Mike, I don't know if you've got some.
No, it's sounds pretty reasonable to me, actually. So.
Yeah. And those are things that, again, I know I'm not going to change anybody's mind, but I felt like they, as I read these posts on my post, these comments, I'm like, wow, is there that many people that think that, we totally pulled off this inside job on that? So, there's a question here. I'm going to answer one. I heard from an F-16 scramble pilot from DN that they only scramble Vipers to flight 93, but didn't ever shoot it down. Yeah, and we actually never. My understanding is no fighters ever actually made it to any of the airplanes. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, why is that? Well, I said this in my previous podcast. We just weren't prepared for it. We never envisioned that they would take our airplanes
and use them against
us. So everything we had from air defense and what we were doing was based on
a conventional enemy.
Yeah, an enemy coming into our country, and we were prepared for that. Now, as you've seen on my Instagram, there's been a lot of fighters on my wing, and all I would say, I won't talk about all the details of that, but let's just say we're prepared for it now, and we've done what we needed to do to make sure that
it never happens again.
So, but they caught us off guard, unfortunately, on that day, and we didn't do it. So
another popular one that I hear a lot is that witnesses say that the plane going into the Pentagon was actually a cruise missile, or looked like a cruise missile.
Yeah, that's a great one. The Pentagon, there's like one scratchy photo or video of the airplane coming in. Here's what I would say about that. It looks to me, again, being an accident, investigator, is the airplane skipped into the Pentagon. They actually hit the ground just prior to the Pentagon, which probably, probably saved a lot because they didn't have the full force in there. So
lost a lot of energy.
Yeah. So, and there's some pictures out there of pieces of the airplane kind of around the Pentagon. Obviously that airplane disintegrated, and, we lost a lot of lives on that. But anyway, this is the day after that. And that's my post yesterday was all about just remembering it. So I had no intention of engaging in all this yesterday. So, yeah, that's really it that I've got for 9/11. Again, I'm sure there's 1,000 things out there people want to talk about, but that's the gist of it. The last thing I was going to talk about that kind of rolls into that a little bit, and I had some firsthand experience, was TWA 800. And I made I made a post on that probably, I don't know, 6 months ago. And I was surprised at how many people kind of, again, thought that had been either shot down by a terrorist, had a bomb on board, or our Navy accidentally shot it down. As I mentioned in my post, I had the opportunity to go out. I went through the NTSB's school out there, and I had the opportunity to actually go look at that. And they have put together 95% of that airplane, which is pretty incredible. And the reason they did it is because there was so much outcry that this might have been a terrorist bomb. So they really had the only way you could figure out. You got to think about it. This airplane blew up off the Atlantic, off the coast of the Atlantic, and it was in, I don't know, a couple 100 feet of water. So they ended up, in essence, going down and diving and collecting all of the.
How long did that
remains.
recovery take?
I don't know the exact amount of time, but it was significant. It was very expensive, and and the reason they spin it and did it was to be able to ultimately find out what happened. So I would say going through that, walking that airplane is pieced together in a hangar, and it is very eerie, very creepy to walk through that because they have a lot of the seats back in place. They have, the metal is obviously, it's all, you can go out on the internet and see pictures of it, but it's very eerie because you just think, man, there was somebody sitting in that seat. There was somebody there, and it was powerful. But what I found out, and what going through that and seeing the evidence with my own eyes, was that ultimately they had an explosion in one of the tanks, in their center fuel tank, and there's a lot of evidence to show that. They don't necessarily know what caused the explosion. That's still up for debate, but that's what it looked like. Is that they ended up having that, and it ended up blowing the cockpit off, which is terrible to think. The airplane kept flying for quite some distance and ultimately crashed. But anyway, there's a lot of pieces out there, but it's one of those theories that a lot of people can jump in and go, hey, I didn't really say this at the first, but I really believe this, that the internet has I love the internet. It's awesome. It's great for all these things. IG is great, but it gives a platform maybe for people to kind of pull their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And
it allows for the easy spread and exchange of ideas. But that doesn't mean all those ideas are good or intelligent.
Exactly. So maybe we see a lot more of that now because of that. So anyway, let's see. I got you got a couple questions there. What do we got, Derek? You got anything? And we'll finish.
Todd B. Leakey, TB Leakey from Instagram, asks, one thing I've heard is how perfect the buildings fell. They didn't fall sideways; they fell straight down.
Yeah, that's a great question, Todd. And I if you look though, that's a little bit of a misnomer. When you first see the building starting to come down, if you see the top of it, it is canted at about 30 degrees, and there's a good picture out there that shows that. However, because of what actually caused the buildings to come down, i.e. a pancake force
from the inside,
once that floors gave way, it really was a demolition in essence. It's exactly what they do when they demolish a building. They get the structure weak, and that's how they can drop these huge skyscrapers and not have them fall over and damage other buildings. So that probably plays into the conspiracy theory. However, that's in essence what happened. Once it was weakened, it pancaked. And another thing that the pancaking does is it shoots all the debris out the side. So when you see it begin to come down, you see all that debris coming out. Again, that looks like a
controlled
explosion that plays into it. But in reality, what it is as the floor above falls onto the floor below, there's no place for that stuff to go, and it just gets squirted out the sides of the building. So yeah, good question. I think that's what happened. I mean, it did fall pretty much both of them straight down. But again, the way I see it, it doesn't necessarily play into the fact that we blew that up. So, well, I think that's enough on this one, Derek. What do you think? We'll wrap this podcast up. We just touched on this. If you want to stay with us, we'll come back and we'll discuss. We'll take a short break, then we'll come back and we'll discuss some of the more fun stuff like chemtrails and and that kind of stuff. We'll get into that.
Yep.
So.
Before we wrap up this first segment, I would like to give a shout out to our first sponsor of the podcast, which is very exciting, Strikeforce Energy. If you're tired of energy drinks and the cost of energy drinks, be sure to check out Strikeforce Energy. They come in little single-use tin pouches or a 60-ounce squirt bottle. It tastes delicious. You get all of the effects of a Monster, and it only costs about 99 cents per packet, which is a lot better. You can put it in water, drinks, soda. I believe on their bottles they also have various alcohol mixtures you can mix with it as well. Be sure to use code Combat Learjet, one word, at strikeforceenergy.com to receive 20% off and to help support this podcast. Before we wrap this up, would everyone like to give their social media handles for our listeners to go and find you?
Yeah. So, yeah, awesome. For me, so yeah, I'm on Combat Learjet, obviously, on Instagram and on Facebook. So you can Google that and find it. And Mike, if you want to share yours.
Yeah, sure. I'm at Pilot Wagner on Instagram and just Mike Wagner on Facebook. And I believe I'm like Mike Wagner 23 on YouTube or something. Just it's easier to just Google my videos and you'll find me a lot easier on YouTube.
Definitely worth checking out his videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time. All right, for our live cast, we're going to keep going. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll roll into segment 2. So we'll be right back, Mike.
Okay, cool.
All right, we are back.
All right.
Welcome, everyone, to the Combat Learjet podcast. My name is Derek from moguns.com. I'm joined tonight again by Steve from Combat Learjet on Instagram and Facebook, and Pilot Wagner from Instagram. How's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Doing great. Hey, thanks for joining us again, Mike. I appreciate it. So,
No, man. Yeah, I love being on. It's great. Yeah, thanks for asking me.
you bet, man. So, we obviously talked about what you did last time. This one, we're going to make it a little bit more lighter. And I wanted to obviously talk about chemtrails. I'm going to I'll tell my story a little bit, how I was first introduced to chemtrails, and Mike, if you want to mention yours, how you kind of
Yeah,
got that, and
sure.
then we'll just discuss it as pilots, because the thing I always laugh about chemtrails, if anybody in the world knows about chemtrails or is in the know on chemtrails, it's going to be pilots, right? Because we're the ones supposedly dispersing them. But they seem to have a hard time finding pilots that actually say,
because they're all in on it.
Yeah,
Every last one of us is in on it.
All of them.
Yeah, I've heard that. You know, you're just a drone. You don't know. So I'll start, Mike, and then I'll let you take over.
Sure.
For me, with chemtrails, I had just started my Instagram page. I was just kind of getting going, and I mentioned this, I think, on the last one, but I posted a video of just a contrail. I had a airplane go over the top, cool contrail, and if I remember right, I filmed it long enough where once the contrail dissipates a little bit, you can see it spinning, you know, as it's out there, you know, whirling around. And I just thought, hey, it's great. I posted it. I hashtagged contrail. That was it. And next thing I know, I had a whole mess of people coming onto my page just saying, hey, that's not a contrail, that's a chemtrail. And honestly, I had no idea what a chemtrail was. So I had to Google it. And that's when I fell off
went down the rabbit hole
into the world of chemtrails. And then I had a contrail sprayer as his IG name. He contacted me, and he had actually, I think his IG name maybe was like chemtrail sprayer for a while. And so it was amazing. You still go on his page and just see the hatred out there. These people think he's actually one of those guys. But so he contacted me, DM'd me, and told me some stuff like, hey, yeah, these guys think you're spraying chemicals. And so that kind of started it. And then it grew from there. And of course, my sense of humor is I like to tease them a little bit. And I ended up using satire. And then that ultimately is what gave Derek the idea to design the our shirt, which is basically take off the Coca-Cola. So This says chemtrails. But so that's how I got involved with it. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what we really think they are and what's going on. So how about you, Mike? What did you end up?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, yeah. Same kind of thing. You know, I just put up something like with contrails or whatever. And somebody had obviously, you know, said, oh, they're chemtrails, started this big argument. I'm like, what kind of person, you know, believes in this stuff? But, you know, it's kind of and then you start looking and you're like, wow, you know, there's some really bad science out there. But it's kind of and, you know, gullible people are everywhere, I guess. And you can just put a little fake science there, just enough to make someone that doesn't have much of a, or any flying background or, you know, science background whatsoever. And, you know, it becomes believable to them. I can see where that happens, but
yeah, just enough fake science for people who aren't real familiar with science to believe it.
Yeah.
Well, and like we talked about last time, we have the internet now that you have these people kind of promoting it. And next thing you know, people going, yeah, I do see these things in the sky. And, you know, what is causing that? So, you know, I would, Mike, I don't know if you want to give a stab at what you think a contrail is, or if you want me to,
Well, yeah, I mean, first, you know, I'll tell the joke, but it's you know, virtual reality would have loved to have been on here too, but she's dispatching right now, and she's actually working with something called CLEAR, chemicals lacking exterior air reaction, which, as you guys know, is like invisible. So basically, we've been spraying this invisible stuff for the last couple of years, and when they see it in the sky, that's just a contrail. It's the invisible stuff that's scary. So, but I know you guys are both in on it too, so we can just kind of it's not classified anymore. So
well, and now I think your secret's out now. So
yeah. So again, when you see a clear sky, just be more afraid, because that's actually worse.
So now they're going to be worried for both of them. Yeah,
exactly.
That's terrible. But
I know, I hate to do that.
It is funny because it's sad, because I will see people look at a great day and see it on their post going, God, this is disgusting. And I'm thinking, it's a great day with a few contrails across the sky. But, you know, I would say, I guess, first off, I do get asked questions. What is a contrail? And the question I hear probably most from the conspiracy theorists is, and they like to hold on to this one, is the contrails, i.e., to them, the chemtrails that stay around in the atmosphere are the ones that are really the bad ones. And there's a lot of things that play into a contrail. There's some days, and I don't know all the specifics on it, but it ultimately is the atmospheric conditions. So I think probably a cold, moist atmosphere is the best conditions to produce a contrail.
The same conditions that you get fog.
Yeah, you get fog. Yeah, as it's coming out, you get the steam coming out of the tailpipe of your car. And our engines, as they burn, different engines burn at different temperatures. And as they burn, there's some moisture in that exhaust, along with particles, from just the burnt stuff coming out. And all that plays into whether or not a contrail forms. And there are certain conditions that the contrails are incredible. I know Lou 747 posted a contrail video, and it went. Where did you say it ended up going, Mike? Did you?
I think I saw like National Geographic actually posted it or something. It was just phenomenal. I think it was Lou B 747 or something, and it was just the 787, just the perfect light behind it and everything.
Was that the one that got like almost 100 million views on
Yeah,
Facebook?
it was crazy.
Yeah, it went viral, and it was just he caught it just right. Unfortunately, Lou put his watermark at the very end, and some unscrupulous people lopped that off, and then it went viral. But yeah, it was just a perfect conditions, and he sees a lot more of those because he flies international routes, and I know that they're flying very specific to different points over the water, and so you're meeting different airplanes at points, unlike in the States where we get cleared direct to wherever it's
more of a highway.
Yeah, it's more of a highway going over the water like that. So he gets a lot of great videos, and I know just having talked to him, he's able to capture some of those. But yeah, it was an incredible one, and the conditions were perfect for a contrail that day.
Yeah, I saw a great Facebook, one of the conspiracy Facebook pages had put it up, and the guy was like, "That's aluminum chaff," and he was just going on, and of course, it's just hilarious. So there's no doubt about it. This is what this is. It's a great explanation of it. And just like, wow, that's pretty insane. So,
yeah.
One of the best decisions I've ever made was to infiltrate a lot of the conspiracy theory Facebook groups.
Oh yeah, they're fun.
Just sit and watch. It's endless entertainment.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and I mean that's that's really what causes them. Now, I would say, why do some stay longer than others? And it's ultimately it's the moisture content in the air. So if it's a real dry air, you could get a contrail, but in essence, it freezes into ice crystals right immediately as it comes out of the engine. Those ice crystals do what's called sublime. And the pilots out there know what that means. You climb to sublime. If you get icing on your airplane, you're going to climb to get that to go away. And what that ends up, in essence, doing is going from a frozen form directly to a gas form. So it skips the liquid thing. So that's what sublime means. And that's why some chemtrail, i.e. contrails, go away quickly. The air's real dry. The ice crystal sublimes and turns into a gas, and it's gone.
And to the conspiracy theorists, those are the only ones that are actual contrails.
They're contrails.
Everything else
gas. Is gas and is chemtrail.
So, chemtrail, absolutely.
Yeah. And then they believe that we're putting aluminum. There's all sorts of reasons. Barium.
Yeah. We I've always had a question for these guys and no one's really ever been able to answer it for me. And that was, the actual weight of aluminum and barium are like 27 pounds per gallon. I mean, how does the weight and balance really work with that? I mean, no one's ever been able to really explain how, when jet fuel, it's fairly light, but it's, critical to, the weight and balance of the airplane. But somehow we're just putting these massive tanks of this really, really heavy stuff in these airplanes and flying across the country and flipping switches and,
switches.
Yeah.
I do love it whenever I see the pictures of the inside of planes that are filled with tanks for whatever myriad of reasons they do.
I may or may not have photoshopped one of those.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that's it. Well, it's out there now.
Yeah,
Those are
it's there.
typically done for weight and balance tests, but they love those, and
Mhm.
it. My thought, and I mentioned this to you earlier, Mike, because
Yeah.
I have no means of calculating this, but
Mhm.
how many particles are in our atmosphere, and even if we were spraying, would it? To me, it's like spraying food, dye in the ocean and trying to turn the ocean a different color. It's just
Right.
it's so overwhelming how big our atmosphere is, and the fact that you would be able to do that on a global size is kind of
Yeah, I
crazy.
mean, yeah, something like a Boeing 747-400. I mean, somebody that flies one probably knows, but it's got to have this big payload, and I read somewhere one time that, in order to create like a percent of 1% of extra aluminum across the United States, you'd need like 14.25 million 747s dropping stuff full time. It's just,
That might get noticed.
yeah. I haven't seen it yet, but the invisible stuff is real. We're working on it.
Yeah. Well, if you guys are full up on that invisible stuff, then
Yeah.
nobody's going to be happy now.
No, well,
clear days. There's something to be.
Are there any vitamins we should be taking to build an immunity to that? Or
yeah, gin works if you you scrape
Yeah.
yourself with aluminum on the arm and pour gin on it. Works really well, I've heard. But yeah, don't anybody do that.
Well, that's great.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and obviously we talked to Mike. We talked about your past a little bit, but I
Mhm.
want to give you an opportunity to share some of your flying experiences. Any of the things that you'd like to, some of your best experiences, worst experiences. I think people really enjoy that part of it too. Hearing.
Yeah, yeah. I've had just a pretty average, normal career. No real issues. It's just been really enjoyable. Had a lot of fun doing it, and still having fun doing it. Still got quite a long ways to go, so more to come. And I just like the fact that it lets you not sit around into like a cubicle all day, that type of stuff. And I don't know. I just you have all these flights. I can't really single one really good one out or one really bad one. Obviously you have emergencies and stuff, and I've had a few, but nothing too serious, and those are kind of memorable. Sometimes you'll have just flight. I remember I had one flight one time, and there was never a bump. It was like Delta smooth the entire time, and and we just even the landing was like perfect, and the passengers got off, never said a word to us. And I was like, can you believe that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we worked really hard for that. And,
Yeah.
But if anything happens, everyone will let you know on the way out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Those flights are. I always joke that I'm looking for my perfect flight. It's just, it's one of those businesses where it's really easy. That's why there's usually two of you up there, because you miss stuff, you make mistakes, things happen, and the other guy's hopefully there to help catch it, and
you forget to turn off the barium when you're landing.
Yeah,
Oh man,
something terrible like that. So yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
great. And you're I don't know. Tell me a little bit about your current airplane. I'm not necessarily an expert on that. So
Mine, yeah, it's an older business jet. Basically, the ones I fly usually late '90s, early 2000s. Um, Avionics were really good back in the '80s,
Yeah.
whatever. But it's just it's getting kind of old. It's just it's a really nice airplane to fly though. It handles kind of like a 172. You really don't have to work too hard to fly it, and which I like. It's nice and easy,
Yeah.
But yeah, fast. It does 370 down low, 0.862 up high.
Wow.
When you got the atmosphere for it, the engines are a little bit underpowered to do 8.6. So we're generally trucking around like 8.3 or 8.2 up in the higher levels. But
Yeah. What do you guys cruise at in that typically?
yeah, it's just 8.3 to depends. I mean, like I said, as it gets a little cooler, it can go a little faster, I guess. But like 8.3 to 8.5, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and altitude wise, what do you guys typically do for that?
We'll do anywhere, usually 39 to 43, sometimes 45.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's pretty calm. I mean, it's a lot faster than what the Learjet at cruise was, but
yeah.
we typically be in the high threes, low fours. So
Yeah, if we were up at 45, we'd probably be doing like 7.9 or 8.0 or something. But
yeah,
Nice.
yeah, that's great. Well, it sounds like you got a great career. Enjoy what you're doing, and we talked about this last time, but flying is I mean, I'm biased, but it is a great career. And, like we said in the first episode back, is it, we want to encourage folks that want to get involved in this to do that. And, I can't say I honestly, I mean, some pilots are like, yeah, my job's okay. And there's obviously some jobs that are better than others in the flying world. And, the guys that are working hard and flying all night long in a single seat cargo configuration airplane, that's tough. They're working hard to get their flight hours. But the thing about flying is you just look at it steps, like I'm going to do this for a while, and then my goal is to do something else. But it's a good career. It's a good path. And, I definitely want to encourage people that want to get involved in that. So,
yeah.
This is a great platform to answer questions and help people who want to get involved.
We're still trying to find our footing on this whole podcast, what it's going to work, what it turns into. This was just a fun one tonight.
Yeah, you know what? One thing I get too, like just speaking of like learning, if I get people all the time like, oh, I want to go learn how to fly. How do I do it? Just go somewhere and ask. It's not that hard to go to an airport and go, I want to take a flying lesson. They'll be happy to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I know I've known of different places that they'll give you your first flying lesson free.
Wow, that's cool.
So, if you'll come out, I've seen that advertised, first one free, so it's not a long one. You might get 30 minutes or something, but they'll at least give you an opportunity to be exposed to that. So
like cocaine, the first one's free.
Yeah, they get you.
Yeah, get you hooked.
And it's going to cost you more than cocaine when it's all said and done. But yeah, that's it exactly. But yeah, I want to, people that want to do that, I want to encourage them to get out. And there's a lot of stories out there of different paths. I'm amazed of the different paths, and I'm intrigued by the non-military paths, because I don't know how all that works, and I know that guys work really hard to get where they're at.
It's a very competitive field.
It is, and the military is a little different. I mean, not that we don't work hard in the military. It's just, I mean, I'm very grateful that Uncle Sam trained me how to fly. You pay in a different way in the military. You're you're paying being gone and doing some of the other stuff, but it's all good. So, well, I was just going to touch on it momentarily, and then we'll wrap this one up as my flat earthers. I do get asked a lot, like, are you a flat earther? Because I kind of throw it out there, like, either way. No, I'm not a flat earther. Good folks, but again, it's one of those things where I feel like the internet is leading people astray on this.
Yes.
I think, what did you say, Derek? They have to overcome a lot of evidence.
There's so much that has to be ignored or just dismissed as fake, because that's the argument for everything. Well, what about this? That's fake.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's fake too.
Yeah.
It just.
But if you give them actual facts, then you're part of it. So
Yeah, you're getting paychecks from the Illuminati to
exactly. Well, we are, but
and I laugh at it, but honestly, there's a part of me that it's kind of sad that
it is.
Some of these young kids are buying into this, going, I mean, I've made the argument on previous ones that I've flown in essence entirely around the world, not like in one time, but I went all the way around, halfway around one way and halfway around the other, and the two have crossed paths. So
but you're like a NASCAR driver on the sombrero. You're always just turning left a little bit so you don't fly off into space.
Yeah. So I guess I didn't realize it, but it did. From what I've seen and the way I've flown, it's not flat to me. So.
Yeah, I agree. You can pretty much see the those are the penumbra, the penumbra, whatever they call it, the shadow of the Earth when it's coming up. It's always curved. There's the edge of night coming. It's never flat. So
I posted some pictures. Been a while back, but I was going way up north.
When you're going up
I think it was going up. And Todd, you'll know this. We mentioned I was going up to Inuvik, I think, and the sun was coming up behind me, and it's pretty far north. It's way north up there, and the curvature of the shadow of the Earth was incredible, and it's just no doubt that obviously that's being cast out there. And I posted it with not many responses as to what that really was, but Photoshop. That's my favorite.
The one thing to do is that'd be really hard to Photoshop and keep some things in correct perspective, like the stuff that's close to you.
Yeah.
And, have that big curve. Hey, look, my compass looks exactly normal, but there's this curve out there. It's like, man, that's with all the bugs on the windshield. That's just insanely talented Photoshop work.
They
If
have a
someone could do that.
full-time team of Photoshop experts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and that was, I did a mission up there. It was just, there's an alert mission up there that they kind of watch. And so it was neat going up there and seeing it. And
An alien crashed in the polar ice caps.
yeah, it might've been it too. So, but, that's really, we just want to have a good time with this one tonight. But, Mike, I want to give you the last word. If you have anything that you wanted to mention or talk about, I know you got some really neat stuff out there. So.
Oh yeah, I just like to keep creating stuff. Just got done with the last video, and now working on the next one. I just I got an idea for it. It's just got to come together a little bit.
Yeah,
awesome.
And
what is your last video?
The last one was the I Sit Around Part 2, but the big one was the chemtrails at night, where I had I don't know and I mentioned this on a different podcast, on the Pilot to Pilot one, where I'd taken, like, I'm a big fan of the movie Airplane, as any pilot should be.
Yep.
And they had the Airplane was actually a parody of a movie called 0 Hour. And it's like they took 0 Hour and they took like all the camera angles and most of the dialogue and all sorts of stuff. And it's really funny to watch, because it's like a serious version of Airplane where they all eat food poisoning. It's the same story. And they had I don't know, just really done a good parody of this. And if you've seen Airplane and know it, you can watch 0 Hour and pretty much quote the movie line for line too.
Yeah.
But I said, hey, why don't I do this with the chemtrails at night thing, and take the original Corey Hart video, the sunglasses at night, and do like time it exactly where I can have like people moving the same, people looking the same camera angles, all that sort of stuff. And I got to do a post on that. Actually, I keep talking about it. I'm gonna put it together, because it'll look pretty neat, because you can see how it goes together. And then towards the end, I kind of got away from it a little bit, but at the beginning, it's like spot on. I was like, wow, that's really kind of cool. It was really hard to do, but that was kind of the fun behind chemtrails at night. And I knew it was going to mess with the conspiracy theory people. So.
Absolutely. Would it be all right if we put a little sample of that song at the end of this episode for people
Oh, heck
to listen and then
yeah.
go find you on YouTube?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be awesome, because it's endlessly entertaining, all that. Before we wrap up this second segment, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, our first sponsor of the podcast, Strikeforce Energy. Is owned and created by a former Navy SEAL. Is an awesome little energy supplement. Comes in a little tin pouch that you can add to any drink you can imagine. Personally, I don't like pre-workout. It just doesn't sit well with me, but I always really like adding a shot of Strikeforce to my drink in the morning before workout. It's a lot cheaper, and I think a lot better for you than an entire can of Monster or Red Bull or anything like that. Be sure to go to strikeforceenergy.com and use the code COMBATLearjet, one word. You're going to get 20% off your order of an awesome product, and you're going to help support this podcast and keep it on the air, because we're having a blast with this, and we'd really like to keep doing it. Any closing thoughts, Steve?
Hey, I appreciate, Derek, you putting this together. I appreciate it, Mike, you coming on. It was awesome. Good time.
Oh, yeah.
I will definitely work. I saw some comments. I will work on trying to get a flight doc on here so we can answer medical questions.
Awesome. And we also want to thank everyone watching live in the live stream, asking questions and engaging us. For those listening on iTunes or Google Play, if you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Combat Learjet, you can jump into these podcasts live and hang out with us and ask some questions, and we'll do our best to answer them for you.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody joining in. So
yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, you guys. It was a blast.
All right, brother. Thanks, man. See
you. Bet. Yeah, I'll see you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.